The wind howled like a chorus of demons across the frozen tundra of Yakutia, Siberia's most unforgiving wilderness. It was January 1982, and the thermometer had plummeted to an unthinkable -71 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, exposed skin freezes in minutes, breath crystallizes into ice shards, and even steel becomes brittle enough to shatter. This was the coldest night in living memory, the kind of cold that makes the earth itself seem hostile to all life. In a small wooden cabin on the edge of the vast white expanse, 90-year-old Anya Mikhailovna sat by her dying fire, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of weak tea. Her face was a map of 9 decades lived in this harsh land, every wrinkle a story of survival, every scar a testament to resilience. She had buried 2 husbands, raised 6 children, and outlived most of her generation. But tonight, she faced something she had never encountered in all her years: absolute desperation. Outside, in a rough shelter made of timber and ice, huddled her flock of 40 snow sheep. These weren't just animals to Anya, they were her life's work, her companions, her reason for waking each brutal morning. Snow sheep, rare and magnificent creatures adapted to Siberia's extreme conditions, had been entrusted to her care by the local collective farm after the younger shepherds had fled south, unable to endure the merciless winter. The first howl came at midnight. Anya's blood turned colder than the air outside. She knew that sound, had heard it in nightmares since childhood. Wolves. But this wasn't the usual pack of 10 or 15 that occasionally prowled the region. This was different. The howls multiplied, overlapping, creating a symphony of hunger that seemed to come from every direction at once. She struggled to the window, her arthritic joints protesting every movement, and peered through the frost-covered glass. What she saw made her heart stop. The moonlight reflected off the snow revealed an impossible sight: hundreds, perhaps 1,000 wolves, their eyes glowing like yellow lanterns in the darkness. They moved like a living tide of fur and teeth, drawn together by the unprecedented cold and desperate starvation. The brutal winter had decimated their usual prey, and now they had caught the scent of her sheep. Anya knew the truth immediately: she and her flock were going to die tonight. Most people would have barricaded themselves inside, accepting the loss of the animals to save themselves. But Anya Mikhailovna was not most people. These sheep represented more than livestock. They were the last pure bloodline of Yakutian snow sheep in the region, animals whose wool and meat had sustained her people for generations. To lose them would be to lose a piece of her culture, her heritage, her very identity. With trembling but determined hands, she began to dress. Layers upon layers of wool and fur, felt boots wrapped in canvas, a rabbit skin hat that covered everything but her eyes. She pulled out her late husband's hunting rifle, an ancient bolt-action weapon from before the revolution, and checked the ammunition. 12 bullets. Against 1,000 wolves. She laughed bitterly at the absurdity. But Anya had one advantage: she knew this land, knew the wolves, knew the cold. She understood that the wolves, driven mad by hunger, would be reckless, disorganized. She knew that fire, even in this impossible cold, remained their ancient enemy. And she knew that sometimes, survival wasn't about winning but about lasting long enough for dawn. She stepped outside into the throat of winter. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath, making her lungs burn. But she pushed forward, her boots crunching through snow that squeaked like styrofoam in the extreme temperature. She could see them now, closer than before, a shifting mass of gray and white forms, circling, probing for weakness. Behind the sheep shelter, she had stacked birch logs and kerosene for emergencies. With fingers that could barely bend, she began building a wall of fire between the wolves and her flock. The kerosene wouldn't last long in this cold, but it would burn hot and bright. She struck match after match, her hands shaking, until finally the kindling caught. The flames leaped up, and the wolves recoiled, but only temporarily. Hunger was a more powerful force than fear. The first attack came minutes later. A massive alpha male, driven beyond caution by starvation, leaped through a gap in the flames. Anya didn't hesitate. She raised the rifle and fired. The shot echoed across the tundra, and the wolf fell. But 10 more surged forward. For hours, Anya fought. She fired her remaining bullets with precision born of decades of hunting. She threw burning logs at the advancing wolves. She screamed and shouted, making herself seem larger, more dangerous than one frail old woman had any right to be. When the rifle ammunition ran out, she wielded a wooden staff, striking at any wolf that came close enough. The sheep, terrified, huddled in their shelter, their survival dependent entirely on this ancient woman's refusal to surrender. Around 3 a.m., Anya collapsed. Her strength was gone. The cold had seeped into her bones, and frostbite blackened her fingertips. The fire was dying, reduced to embers. The wolves sensed victory and began to close in, their circle tightening. Anya prayed, not for salvation, but for the sheep to somehow survive, for her death to mean something. Then, like a miracle, she heard it, the distant roar of engines. A convoy of tractors from the collective farm, sent by her grandson who had grown worried when she hadn't responded to the radio, came crashing through the snow. Their headlights blazed like suns, their horns blared, and men jumped down with rifles and torches. The wolves, finally overwhelmed, scattered into the night, disappearing like shadows into the white wilderness. Anya was carried inside, barely conscious. Medics worked frantically to save her from hypothermia and frostbite. For 3 days, she hovered between life and death. When she finally woke, her first words were, "The sheep?" "All alive," her grandson whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Every single one, because of you." Anya lost 3 fingers to frostbite and never fully recovered her strength. But she had saved her flock, preserved the bloodline, and demonstrated what the human spirit could accomplish when faced with impossible odds. The story of the 90-year-old woman who held off 1,000 wolves at -71 degrees Celsius spread throughout Siberia, becoming legend. Some say it was exaggerated, that there couldn't have been 1,000 wolves. But those who saw the tracks in the snow the next morning, who counted the frozen wolf carcasses, who witnessed the evidence of that brutal night, knew the truth. Anya Mikhailovna lived 4 more years, long enough to see her sheep multiply, to hold her great-great-grandchildren, to know that her last fight had mattered. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep, the entire region mourned a hero. On her gravestone, they carved a simple epitaph: "She stood against the darkness and did not yield."